Hey, y'all, welcome back to a Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024 edition here on the Chase Thomas podcast. From still the aforementioned Chase Thomas coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. We've got the Tennessee Vols sports guys with Rocky Top Insiders Ryan Schumpert this week, talking all things, you guessed it, all things Tennessee athletics. We talk about Tyre West, who had a fantastic game for Tennessee against Chattanooga on Saturday. His stock being up. We talk about the receivers as a whole and why their stock is very high following the big blowout 69-3 win over the Mocs coming out of Saturday. We also do a little bit of a preview and what fans might expect to see out of NC State and their talented pass catchers and what Grayson McCall is going to look like against this stout Tennessee defensive front. And Nico's first big road test here in the regular season in Charlotte on Saturday. We also talk a little Bishop Boswell, true freshman year one expectations and preview for him for Rick Barnes' men's basketball team. And we also talk Kavares Tears season review for Tennessee baseball and best moments, what we're going to miss about him, and his career at Tennessee over the years. So all that and more coming up next here with Ryan Schumpert of Rocky Top Insider. Don't forget, folks, you can watch this show on youtube.com/Chase Thomas Podcast. Like and subscribe if you're watching us there right now. It helps other people find the show, and it helps this very show continue to grow on the platform. Well over 2,000 subs and growing more and more each and every day. Let's get to 3,000 get to 3,000 before the end of September. So I think we can do it. So make sure you're subscribed on the YouTube channel if you are not already and you prefer watching your podcast. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or however you get your podcast. If you're listening to us via the audio way today, that's great. And if you have not already done so, please make sure that you subscribe on your preferred podcast player so you never miss an episode of this daily program, but also leave us a 5-star rating and write us a review on your preferred podcast player because you guessed it, it helps other people find the show and it helps this very show continue to grow a little bit more each and every day. So if you could do that today, I would greatly appreciate it. Go check out chasethomaspodcast.com for access to all of my previous episodes, learn more about Knoxville's #1 Tennessee Vols independent sports podcast that we do each and every day here on the program. And also read me. I'm writing all over the place, writing all kinds of columns and everything over there at TPL Tennessee. So check us out at the Players Lounge Tennessee today. If you're not already, and become a TPL Plus member to get access to all of our premium content that we're doing over on TPL. So TPL Tennessee, check it out today and all the good writing we've got cooking over there on the written front. So all kinds of great ways to keep up with the show and keep up with what I'm doing over there and all that good stuff. So Uncle Darren, let's go.
The Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas podcast from still the aforementioned Chase Thomas coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ over there in Knoxville, Tennessee as well. Rocky Top Insider's own Ryan Schumpert. Ryan, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. Glad to have football back. Trying not to, as I wear my Cubs shirt, trying not to get diluted too much in thinking the Cubs can make the playoffs. I do have had the nice meme usage of the items in mirror are closer than they appear, and it's the Chicago Cubs logo, wild card race. But doing good. Glad to have ball back, and it wouldn't be a Cubs season if there wasn't some sort of push in September. It's inevitably not going to end up making the playoffs, just to delude yourself and get excited about baseball again.
I think the funny thing about the Cubs roster is it should be elite because you go through it, and I encourage folks to go look through their 1 through 9. It's just first rounders everywhere. Like it's actually kind of like they're the anti-blue chip ratio team where you look at the Cubs roster and you're like first round. Big free agent signing, and they've been over there in the doldrums of the NL Central for the majority of this year. I don't know. It's been tough.
Yeah, they do have a lot of guys, no dudes. Not really anybody in the middle of the lineup that you really fear. And then
Derek Lee not walking through that door.
Swanson's had a terrible year. Horner's been, mid what he typically is hitting. So it's like a lineup where you look at it and it's not like, all right, you're for sure going to get rid of this guy. You're for sure going to get rid of that guy. But there's just not a whole lot of super dependable guys, and it feels like the best hitters, Bellinger and Suzuki, end up missing a month plus every season too.
Giovanni Soto is not walking through that door. Aramis Ramirez not
Yep.
walking through that door.
These are all my
Uh,
first Cubs teams that I watched. Those 07, 08 teams are really the first ones I can remember watching.
there
Alfonso
you go.
Soriano was my favorite player
Do you
growing
even
up.
remember the Moises Alou? Like, were you born? Hold on, when with
I
that?
was born, but too young to remember. I'd have been like 4. I was born in '99, so
It's funny what sticks out. I remember being at a friend's house at that, and I'm just over there watching Marlins Cubs and
yeah,
spend the night type deal. And I was like, "Whoa!" It was one of those like it was a big deal. And he was like, "What's happening?" I'm like, "I think this guy just became enemy number one. Like this is
yeah.
crazy. This man just really made Moises Alou very very mad." But yeah, that it's weird what sports moments you can like I can recite. I'm like, oh, I know where I was with that.
Yeah.
I remember that. I remember that instance. But you know, I'll also always remember where I was when Tennessee had the third largest victory in football history over the weekend, 69-3 over the Chattanooga Mocs. Many said it couldn't be done, but not us. Not us on this podcast. Even though the haters and evil wishers here on the program who cross pollinate between the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass and the Chase Thomas podcast, as Ryan shared on his August recap here. I don't know, Ryan. This is like the from Always Sunny, the gruesome twosome. Like this is this is what we are for some ball fans. It feels like.
Yeah, no, it's a shame that it had to be a straight at you, because
Mm.
truly what I was trying to share was the people ripping me in the comments. That was what I was.
Well, I'm right there in the
truly
middle.
sharing. What's that?
I'm right there in the middle. You get
You are right
straight
there
at
in the middle.
Ryan, me, or I get a straight, like a direct shot at Ryan, straight at me, direct shot at Ryan. And I'm like, whoa, whew.
So
But it's
I
also good to
wouldn't
know
put that
that we're
direct
cross
shot.
pollinating here. We have
Yeah,
listeners who are listening to both shows. That's good.
it is, but there's plenty of a good content on both the Chase Thomas podcast and the RTI Press Pass to go around. Plenty
Yeah.
of good Tennessee football stuff. Uh, we get a little bit more unhinged on the Chase Thomas podcast, maybe a little bit more bullying, a little bit more name calling. But room for all. Fun here, fun there. Check it all out.
That's the fun part of being independent is we can get unhinged on this podcast. Like there's just a more of like, it's my podcast. It's an independent thing. We're gonna do things in a fun way because I promise folks, it's not that serious. It's not that serious. It's just sports. Ryan Schumpert, first up here, Vols football week 1 stock report. I wrote about this over the weekend. I'm curious from your vantage point, who's trending up, and then we'll get into who's trending down. But who's trending up after the opening win over the Chattanooga Mocs?
I guess I'll start with the less obvious one, so I probably want to say more about the obvious one. But Tyre West was one I thought was pretty obvious. He had a really good day. Didn't play a ton of snaps, but was effective, and it feels like he's sort of stacking good performances, because I would say before Saturday, the best game of his career was in the Citrus Bowl against Iowa. A former 4-star that it feels like, all right, you're kind of to the age now where he's played some, but you can really take a step forward. And to me, that continues to be the question outside of James Pierce with Tennessee's defensive line. We know James Pierce is a star. We know Tennessee's defensive line is deep enough with enough good players that it's going to be really good because of how much depth it has. Does anybody else step up and become just an elite guy like James Pierce did last year? Well, you find a guy here or there to do that, then all of a sudden I think you have the makings of a national title team and what you look like you have on the lines of scrimmage. So just one game, just a game against Chattanooga, but I thought he played really well. And he's one that feels like he maybe has a different gear. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, obviously it's Nico Iamaleava, just how good he was. I liked it. Fox Sports Knoxville on their Sunday morning show, I think it was John Reed and Houston Cress had the title of it or a tweet or something that was like Chattanooga, and that's kind of what you have to say about a lot of it. But Nico just looked really good. You could have really asked him to play any better. All the things that we think he does well were on display. Tennessee throwing the ball over the middle again, well on display. So those were the two I would say. In my story, I had Dante Thornton too. Obviously, he had a couple long catches and 2 touchdowns, and just looks a lot more comfortable as he kind of continues that momentum he had late last season before the season-ending injury.
Good call by Ben McKee on the Dante Thornton, Javante Payton rise here. He's off to a great start to living up to the prophecy that Ben McKee of 247 threw out there this summer. I mean, 3 catches, 2 TDs. Dante Thornton obviously had a great day, but let's circle back to the defensive line because Tyre West obviously had the biggest hit of the day with the first possession for Chattanooga. Just blindsides the dude behind him, comes up and forces the fumble. And I think that was one of the things because, I mean, Tyler Barron, good player, and he was wrecking havoc in the Miami-Florida game. So it wasn't like that he would not be missed potentially. And an elite defensive line, and there wasn't a worry about, okay, how deep is Tennessee going to be on the defensive line post Tyler Barron? But it was one of those where they're deep at Leo, they're deep at defensive tackle. You knew where they're going to rotate there. But the difference, I guess, at strong side defensive end was there was no big name. Like Tyler Barron's a big name NFL type, a strong side defensive end. That looked more like Tennessee's going to rotate and they'll be fine rotating and they're going to be okay there with Jason Jenkins, with Tyre West, with Tyree Weathersby, with Dominic Bailey. Like they're going to be okay there. But it just, what is any of those guys going to pop? Like, are we going to see someone make that jump that Tyler Barron made? Are they going to be able to feast? Because there's going to be so much attention on Pierce and Herring, who got a lot of run. I think Caleb Herring deserves some praise here. And Jordan Ross, like a Jordan Ross block punt return, like Jordan Ross is just, I mean, Tennessee's just got an unbelievable just system of influx of Leos over the next couple of years. It's just honestly insane. But Tyre West was really good. And I mean, maybe Tyre West is the next guy at strong side defensive end. We'll see if he's able to eventually overtake Bailey. It doesn't really matter. I think when you see how Rodney Garner rotates anyway, who really starts and has that. But maybe Tyre West is the next star strong side defensive end. And I think whoever is over there, one of the cool things about being over there at this point this year is that there's so much attention at the defensive tackles and the Leo spot that you're just going to be able to kind of hide out a little bit. Like you're not going to have all this pressure on you and you're not going to have this kind of attention. But I don't know. I think Tyre West really flashed. And I think because he also flashed down the stretch last year, remember, like he had a good Iowa game. I think he was good in Vanderbilt. So he's put together like 3 great games in a row at that spot. So that's a big win for Tennessee of Tyre West, who's kind of a forgotten 4-star from a couple of years ago. Tift County back in the home state. But I think if he ultimately makes the leap this year, it wouldn't be all that surprising, and definitely a stock up guy. And then on the Nico front, I mean, Nico, it's funny because I think a lot of people, and I talked with Aaron Murray about this on TPL Tennessee that you can go check out over there today. Some of the throws, he went and watched every throw, and he's obviously the SEC's all-time passing leader. He knows what he's talking about when it comes to quarterback play and elite quarterback play and what he sees. And what he saw there was NFL throws. Like, it's one thing to throw, like, certain guys are just open or throwing behind guys or guys, like, because Tennessee's receivers should be able to get open on their own, and they shouldn't have had a problem against Chattanooga. But there's a difference with some of the stuff that Nico was doing and the poise, the way he was like just throwing guys up and like to Brazel on the side, like he was throwing Dante Thornton up in the middle. Like Brew McCoy has never looked better. Like that was something you circled down and were like, oh, he has explosiveness. It's not that he wasn't explosive before, but he was just bigger. He just looks lean. He looks like he's in the best shape of his life. And there's just a different, he looks more like Cedric Tillman than kind of like a linebacker over the last couple of years, because Brew is just a huge wide receiver in general and has been bigger those last 2 years. It just looks trim and faster and just still very imposing physically as a receiver at that spot. But the stock up, I think it's just the receivers as a whole and Nico as a whole, because if they're all healthy, and I mean, I was texting in front of the pod over there at Doc Central, Graham Coffee, about this. Tennessee's had trouble through 3 years dealing with the physicality of the Georgia secondary out in space. 6'5" Chris Brazel, 6'5" Dante Thornton, 6'3" Brew McCoy. And what I saw there today or on Saturday, those are receivers who are going to win a lot one-on-one this year. I think this is the best wide receiver group that Tennessee's had in the Heupel era. It's a big part of why Nico looked as good as he did. Is he has real talent, and Tennessee has real juice at receiver this season. But they're just big. They're big. They're imposing. They're able to get open. I mean, Chris Brazel had a couple like the Gaston stuff. He's beating dudes. Like Chris Brazzell is the real deal. He's a plug and play. He's going to be a really good player for Tennessee this year. But Dante Thornton making the leap is just icing on the cake, right? Like, you look at it, Squirrel White didn't really have to do much in this game. They didn't really get much production out of the slot in this game, and you didn't notice because he had over 200 yards receiving with the big three there. So I don't know. I think Nico stock obviously trending up, but the combination of Nico plus the amount of juice at receiver, I think is just huge for a young quarterback getting acclimated here. Is Tennessee's got stars at NFL receivers again. Like, all three of those guys, I think, are NFL receivers.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still a hesitation, a wait and see on the receiver front. Everybody looked good for sure. Brew McCoy looked, like what we saw in fall camp, where he's leaner and maybe a little bit faster. Besides Dante Thornton's the one I put more stock in. And, Chris Brazzell looked really, really good, too, for a first game situation. But to me, on the receiver front, there's still a little bit of hesitation of, all right, let's go see it against a team that's not the FCS. But I agree. I mean, it was certainly encouraging, the builds there. And like you said, kind of at the end, the lack of throwing the slot receiver to me is one of the bigger takeaways from the game as a whole. And Ethan Davis is another guy who you talk about being physically imposing. I thought had a really nice day, kind of a play. It's funny, the first throw anybody ever saw from Nico that turned heads was that ball he threw in the orange and white game 2 years ago down the sideline to Ethan Davis. Well, he kind of threw one somewhat similar, not quite as impressive or hard as a throw, but was still pretty good too. So I agree overall with all the points on the receivers, just maybe a little bit of hesitance there for me. Want to see it a little bit more against better competition.
Downer Ryan has reconvened here.
Yeah, I mean, good.
I don't know how I think it's okay. Like, I think there are some spots where Tennessee fans, I would tell them to hesitate. I mean, Nico's the best quarterback already in the conference. Like, it's one of those where I don't think it's outrageous. I'm just there. Like, there is not amount of orange Kool-Aid that I could drink that'd be like, oh, too much. No. I can't drink anymore. Like, he's that good. Like, Tennessee's got a potential number one overall quarterback here in the NFL draft here.
He's the most talented quarterback in the conference. Yes. I will say that. I don't know if he's the best yet, but I do think he's the most talented.
I would love to give some true serum to guys like Kirby and be like, okay, based on what you've seen thus far, for 1 year, just this year, would you trade straight up Carson Beck for Nico? Just this 1 year? I wonder what they would say. I don't know.
I don't know if Kirby's the guy to ask, because it's like
Steve Sarkisian with Quinn. Like, that
would be the interesting one.
Jalen Milroe at Alabama.
That one would be the interesting one. I just think Georgia, the way they're built and the way they play, Kirby's going to take the veteran who's really talented too. Obviously not. I don't think he's as talented as Nico, but veteran, been through it, really talented, can do a lot of things. But you're right. Milroe would be the really interesting one. Quinn Ewers would be the interesting one. I think Kiffin would probably say Nico. So I think the gap there between Jackson Dart's probably, too big for that one to be super interesting. But yeah, I mean, it'll be, I'm always the hesitance guy after games like this. I'm less keen to say you need to pump the brakes on Nico as I am the receivers. And I know those two things will kind of go hand in hand, but it's not receivers being good against North Carolina State or good against Florida. It's the receivers, what you said to start that, your whole thing about your conversation with Graham Coffey. Are they good enough to win a bunch of one-on-ones against the best secondary in the country in Georgia? That is where physicality, I need to see more.
I think it's possible. I have more hope going into Athens than I did 2 years ago, and Tennessee was number one in the country. Like, I have more hope with Nico and this receiver group, and if this offensive line's healthy. And also Dylan Sampson. Dylan Sampson had way more all-around burst than I thought. Because I think we've seen some bits and pieces of Dylan Sampson over the last 2 years. But I think you and we looked at this year, coming in this year, that like Jalen, there was going to be a drop-off from Jalen to Dylan. I don't think there's going to be a drop-off. And I think Dylan's going to really help in the pass game. Like, Dylan is just a different kind of back. Like, Tennessee also hasn't had somebody like that out of the backfield who's just such a good check-down safety net and can do stuff in space. So I just think they're trending up in so many different areas. The only thing we didn't see that we can't even say, like, I guess maybe say stock down a little bit, is because we just don't know what the back end's going to look like. Ricky Gibson didn't play in this game, so we don't know what that cornerback duo is going to look like against NC State. But also the safeties. Like, Jacoby Thomas, I think, popped when he played. He made a couple of big plays on the ball. Boo Carter popped a little bit too. But I don't know. I think that's the still, let's wait and see, is we just learned absolutely nothing about the secondary because Tennessee was, I mean, James Pierce played 10 snaps and the defensive line just was destroying Chattanooga. They were like, we're not doing anything downfield. We're not going to take any shots. We're not doing any of that. So Tennessee just wasn't tested back there. So we just don't know. So it's still a huge TBD on what this secondary is going to look like against NC State and Charlotte. What was the most telling stat from this game for you?
Yeah, one thing I'll just quickly add to what you said there at the end. Yeah, I had it as a stock hold on the secondary. We just didn't learn anything about it, and it was funny, go and watch Rusty Wright, I believe was Chattanooga's head coach's name, his press conference before the weekend.
Been on the show. Nice guy.
Okay, how about that? Friend of the program. He, was asked about, you watched the Austin P game last year. Do you take anything from that? And I don't know, quite throwing shots would be the right word, but he was kind of like, no. And he said, that was more Tennessee playing bad than anything, and we're not going to reinvent the wheel. And it was funny. There was a point in the game in the second quarter when Tennessee is just boat racing them, and it's 4th and 2 at their own 45, punting it. And I'm like, this is the most anti-Austin P move. Austin P would have gone for this last year, and they would have a trick play ready to roll, and it would have worked. So it's always interesting to kind of see the different philosophies for these coaches in small schools going into the game.
Different personalities.
Yes, for sure. And that coach is at UTEP now, I believe.
He is at UTEP, yeah.
So we will see him in November at Neyland Stadium again. To your question,
I don't want any part of that. We talked about it, I think, last year, 2 weeks ago. I don't, it's actually a respect to Scotty that I want no part of that again. Like, just no thanks. That was
Joe Milton's not walking through that door, Chase. I think you're going to be fine.
I don't know. What about that UConn game last year? That was one we had to think about.
On to your question, and it's probably counterproductive because we just talked about him, but I'll list the numbers and see if Chase, if you can guess what I'm referring to.
Okay.
8, 7, 3, 3, 2, 2. One more 3 that I missed.
Plays before a score for Tennessee?
No, targets for Tennessee receivers. 8 for Chris Brazell, 7 for Brew McCoy, then big old drop-off to 3 for Dante Thornton, Trey Weary, who obviously played a lot in the second half, and Chaz and Nimrod. Squirrel White had 2. They did throw to him on another play, too, that Tennessee had a penalty on. It felt telling. Tennessee rotated a lot, and we just talked about it, but Tennessee rotated a lot. You never know with a new quarterback who's the guys that they have the trust, the comfort in. Certainly, Dante Thornton only played like 18 snaps, so 3 targets and 18 snaps is a pretty good amount, but to me, that's what was telling. It's clearly at this point in the season, Brew McCoy and Chris Brazell are the guys that the Nico Iamaleava trust and the guys that Tennessee's looking to get most involved in the passing game, at least a receiver. 4 for Ethan Davis too, which, given the way it was dispersed, I thought was also noteworthy.
Yeah, and I wonder if that continues. I mean, they're going to rotate. There was no Mike Matthews in this game, who we figure might be a factor this season, even as a true freshman. Like, I don't know, because there will be injuries. Like, there's going to be stuff. Like, everybody's not going to be healthy all year. I wish that were the case, but that's just not how football goes. But, I mean, no Braylon Staley either. Nimrod didn't get, like, it was kind of interesting, because I think people have just penciled in the slot as just always going to be the high stats position in the receiver room at Tennessee and the Heupel offense. And what if it's different? I don't know. Like, that might be interesting, is like the Squirrel White is, because I've always said he's more of like the Hunter Renfro guy. Like, he's solid. He's fine. He's just not Jalen Hyatt. I think people have been waiting. Like, he's had some big plays, but he's solid in that spot. Braylon Staley just feels more like the next just kind of burner and that kind of take the top off and big play slot guy in the next year or two for Tennessee. But that's okay, because like part of it is you have Brazel outside now. You have Brew, who is faster, leaner than he's ever been. You have Dante Thornton, who doesn't have to play a lot of snaps to make a huge impact on a game, as we just saw. You have Caleb Webb. We'll see too. He showed some stuff in space where he duped a couple guys on a quick pass to the left early on in the second half, I want to say. But he made a couple people miss and showed some yak there for Tennessee. So I think they have they have options. And I think Nico has worked with a lot of those guys, obviously. Dante last year a little bit in the second team. Caleb Webb, obviously, he has a lot of targets there and history, so he's probably comfortable in that regard. But I think they're older. This is an older group that he's going to be able to throw around. Caleb Webb's been in the system a long time. Brew's obviously been in the system a long time. Squirrel's now been in the system 3 years. You just look at it like there's just not a lot of young guys who are learning this stuff. It's just kind of like you have to wait on some guys to get it. And like Thornton, now he's had some more time in the system. He seems to have got it. Chris Brazzell just might be a unicorn where he just comes right in and he's so big and like his just frame is just on the side. Like nothing looks uncatchable when you throw Chris Brazzell's way. He's just the ultimate just throw it up and see what happens guy. And Tennessee did not have somebody like Chris Brazzell last year.
They really haven't had anybody like it under hype. Well, I guess Tillman was kind of.
I was gonna say Tillman, I think, is a little bit, but I think Brazzell faster and just a different kind of player.
Yeah, he's got some Marquez Callaway in him. Would be a comparison I'd make. It's always one of those fun things you look back on the Jennings, Callaway, Josh Palmer receiving core, and it's like, man, it would have been fun to watch those guys in competent offense with competent quarterback play. Because I'm about to say, I don't know, Callaway can do some of the things that Brazzell can, but man, maybe he could have if he was in a competent offense. Yeah, I did have the freshman receivers as stock down in this going away from week one, and it's hard to have a ton of stock down on a whole lot of anybody because it wasn't a whole lot of bad that happened in this game, and both those guys were a little bit banged up in fall camp, so that might have been a reason they held him out. Maybe a situation where I think you see Mike Matthews play some by the end of the year, but I just don't see the role being very big at any point this season, and really only a role at all if there are some injuries. But I do think there will be more rotating this year, and I thought the way they did the rotations was interesting too. It wasn't just like a strictly first three receivers, second three receivers, which to me that was almost the thing that made me think, all right, this is real. They're going to do this more. Is that I think the start it was Dante Thornton in for Brew McCoy, and it was still Squirrel White and Chris Brazzell out there. So I'm buying the rotation of the receivers. How deep is still a question to me. I think for sure 5, probably a little bit of Caleb Webb as the 6th guy, but I'm kind of selling, thinking either Mike Matthews or Braylon Staley has a big season this year.
Interesting. I'm still wild card Mike Matthews, and injuries happen, and I'm not going to rule it out. I think Mike Matthews is special, so we'll see. I wouldn't rule it out. Call your shot, Ryan Schumpert. How does the NC State game go in Charlotte on Saturday night?
I think Tennessee wins by 10 points to 14 points. So somewhere in that range would be my pick. I feel good about what Tennessee's offense is going to look like. I feel good about Tennessee's offense putting up 30 plus for sure, maybe even flirting with 40 in this game. We just didn't see we just learned so little about the secondary. The questions are there. Josh Heupel said Ricky Gibson's going to play this week. That is a good sign after he missed the opener. But to me, I think the thing that is really interesting was Concepcion for North Carolina State, who was the ACC Rookie of the Year last year, by far the best playmaker in North Carolina State's offense. They move him around some, but mostly a slot guy. So, how does that affect how Tennessee, who they trust in this game? It was almost a 50-50 split in meaningful football, or the first half between Christian Harrison and Boot Carter. Do they go with the veteran? Do they go with the little bit more athletic guy against a great athlete? So I think Tennessee scores a lot and wins this game relatively comfortably, but not a rout. And I think you'll see Tennessee's pass defense have some woos or some issues in this one.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the most interesting part to me is what the secondary looks like, because I think NC State's got Noah Rogers and how do you pronounce the kid's name?
Concepcion,
yeah. What those two are going to present for Tennessee. Aaron Carter had a couple. He flew to he's flying around a little bit too fast still kind of learning the position. We'll see what he looks like in this game. I mean, part of it is just it's going to be, and this is something I think we talked about in our preview and ultimate, how we're going to look at this Tennessee football season, is that I think Tennessee's secondary, especially the corners, I'm just not worried. I think Jordan Matthews had a good game on Saturday. I think Jalen McMurray is going to be more than fine as a nickel corner for them. I think they're okay at corner. I think Boo Carter and Christian Harrison, we'll see. I think Boo Carter showed enough where it's okay if he has some true freshman moments, because I think he's just naturally good at attacking the ball. I think Jacoby looks like I think Jacoby, the more reps he gets in the scheme, I think the more comfortable and the more obvious it is that Jacoby Thomas should be one of your 2 starting corners. Just natural, like he just naturally flies to the ball. Like there's just something about Jacoby Thomas where you're like, okay, there was a reason he was pretty solid at MTSU last year. And I don't know, I'm a Jacoby Thomas believer more after Saturday. And I think Christian Charles, healthy still. That's another option. So I think even if you're rotating Will Brooks, a lot of tackles, he's still good in run, like in tackling and run defense, like in Tennessee, still one of the best rush defenses in the country. So I just still think the sky is falling, but I am very curious what kind of pressure NC State's able to put on Tennessee's secondary, because I also just think NC State's offensive line and Grayson McCall is not going to be ready for what Tennessee is going to throw at them on the defensive line. I think this is going to be the first stamp of approval of like, oh, Tennessee, this is a national title contender type team up front, because that was something, I don't want to get fans too over their skis here, but there's something to be said about like the Washington run last year. It was not as hard of a schedule for Washington, but the Pac-12, it was tough. They had to win some big games, winning on the road at Oregon and stuff like that, but Michael Penix just kept dealing. Washington had receivers, like multiple NFL receivers. They had some quality running back play, had a good offensive line, a veteran offensive line, and they had a bend don't break kind of defense. And Braylon Trice was good for them on the edge, but they didn't have the kind of dudes that Tennessee has. I just think there is a recipe where Tennessee's just it's a modern recipe to winning a lot of college football games, which is winning in the trenches and elite quarterback play. And that's what they have this year. Like Tennessee, if they're all healthy on the offensive line, the defensive line, and quarterback play, I think you're going to see some lines move more in the favor of Tennessee. Like ESPN already moved them up to the Football Power Index into 7th. They have the 10th best odds, or the 7th best odds of making the national title game, folks. The computers like them 7th best odds of making the national title. 1 in 10 right now, I believe, on ESPN. So I think what you have to look at, and that's higher than I think Mizzou and higher than another SEC team who's right there. Like Ole Miss, I think, too. There is growing optimism, because if Nico, what we saw on Saturday, is legit, I think people are just like, oh, well, NC State struggle with Western Carolina. Maybe you don't want to overreact to that, but it's also like, I think Grayson McCall is going to be in for the craziest defensive line and the craziest pass rush he's ever seen. Like he's at Coastal before this. He's welcome to the show. It's kind of, I think you're going to see a Connor Wegman type welcome to the show in this game, where you're just kind of overwhelmed. I think Grayson McCall is going to be really, really overwhelmed. So I just don't worry about the secondary all that much in this game, because I think this defensive line is going to control this game. I think Tennessee's offensive line, they're healthy and they look good. Like Lance Hurd was good. John Campbell looked good. Cooper, like they're right on the left side. Like Carrick is healthy. They're fine. Like they're older. They're big. It's an SEC type line on both sides of the ball. I just think they're going to win by 14-21 plus. I think this might be close to the half. This might be a Clemson Georgia crockpotting is something I could see happen here, where it's kind of close at the half, and then Tennessee just starts hitting some big plays, and the defensive line and offensive line just wear out NC State and blow the game open. So I actually think they probably win by 3 scores right now, and people are like, whoa, Tennessee just kind of they kind of played with their food a little bit, and then they just started blowing out NC State. I'll probably say like 42 Tennessee, 17 NC State right now. I think people need to understand, everybody healthy at Tennessee right now, they're going to win a lot of football games from what we've seen. Like it's time to drink more Kool-Aid. Like it's okay to be really excited about how good this team can be this season. You don't have to wait on next year. Like this team is winning double-digit games right now, as what we've seen this week, and if they're all healthy, because the quarterback play is so important in this game. You get the best quarterback in the conference, the best defensive line in the conference, that just wins a lot of football games in this sport. And I just think Tennessee fans are just so scared to feel that good about it. And I'm like, man, they even got NFL receivers again. I don't know, man. I'm all in. Ethan Davis, red zone weapon. Dylan Sampson, NFL running back. Whew. It's good, man. I'm so excited. I've talked it's 12-0 on the table, Ryan Schumpert. Is 12-0 on the table?
Can I do a little bit of podcast hosting?
Hmm?
Can I do a little bit of podcast hosting?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Change the graphics right now, the Ryan Schumpert podcast for the next 3 minutes. All right, Chase, you had Tennessee 9-3 last week. That was your final prediction. You were completely on border 9-3, 10-2. What about the Chattanooga game? Like, what's the aspect of it that has you now so bullish? What's changed for you?
I think the receivers are even better than I thought. Like, that's something where you just kind of worry about, like, the transfer guys. Like, I just didn't know if Chris Brazzell would be able to immediately step in and be as good and as comfortable and as acclimated as he is. I didn't expect Brew to look that lean and fast and just there's going to be they're doing jet sweeps to Brew to kick things off. Like, Brew is just a different kind of player. And I think Squirrel's going to come around. And when you're able to get that much production at receiver, not using the slot in this offense, I just think the downfield stuff is going to be ridiculous this year. I think you're going to see closer to what you saw in 2022 with Hendon Hooker, but he's better than Hendon. And I love Hendon, but Nico is throwing off platform. He's just able to make throws that even Hendon couldn't make, but he's also got more talent around him than Hendon had in 2022. I think the offensive line, when healthy, is one of the best in the conference. Like, just seeing it and you're like, oh, Hurd, and you just kind of look at the bodies here and you're like, Tennessee hasn't had this since they had the all 5-star offensive line with Pruitt in that Georgia game. They haven't looked this menacing and this big and this just SEC type feel. Like, they're that loaded on both sides. I think the other thing I saw in this game that makes me think they're going to outpace the 9-3 now is Nico. You just kind of have to be a little nervous, but the combination of Nico and Tennessee just burying teams, with James Pierce not having to do anything, with Joshua Josephs not having to do anything, with Jordan Ross being your fourth Leo and looking as good as he did as a true freshman, I just think they're going to win in the trenches so much that they're going to take so much pressure, because I've been worried about the secondary all summer. I think this front seven is going to take so much pressure off the back end. And I think the corners are also good. Like, seeing Jordan Matthews play really well and Jalen McMurray play really well on Saturday, I'm like, I think they're going to be okay there too. And that's without Ricky Gibson. So, and I'm a big Ricky Gibson proponent here. Boo Carter looked better than I thought. Like, we haven't had a star guy who is able to make the kind of plays and come up and make some big hits. Like, he's comfortable at the line of scrimmage. He's flying around. There's a lot more blue chip athletes and stuff. You just have to see it, you know? Like, there's some things you just have to see and you're like, this Tennessee team's just loaded. Like, I think it's just, they have not looked like a team in the top 12 in the blue chip ratio in the Heupel era yet. It's felt like they've been overachieving most years to this point. I don't think they're overachieving anymore. I think they're just legitimately like loaded at key spots that teams who are loaded at quarterback, offensive line, and defensive line, they usually win 10 plus games in this sport and usually are contending for the playoff and are contending for national titles, because I think I would put Tennessee's quarterback, wide receiver group, and defensive line and a healthy offensive line against anybody in the country right now.
I do think Tennessee has on this team that's good for them is a blend of that kind of younger, now the oldest group. You have some of them in juniors. I think with Tyre West, actually, I was saying this earlier, and I guess we got into another subject. He's kind of was the overlooked guy because him and James Pierce, if I remember correctly, were both signing day or right around signing day.
Yeah, they were late guys.
December 2021, and I was like, this is a good little push to have a little something in the class that, after Tennessee showed some life because things were so dormant right when Heupel took over. And then he kind of became the forgotten guy because of how good Pierce was in that class. But you have a blend of that with the COVID seniors, the 6-year guys, where you still have Amari Thomas, you still have Bryson Eason, you have Keenan Peely, you have some guys that you feel good about as just solid guys. And obviously, Amari Thomas was a 4-star. Some of those guys were big recruits too, but you feel good about that. On the Nico, I guess the two things I would say that make me feel, the one thing that makes me feel good, or maybe not pumping the brakes much on the performance, is just like the way you've seen everybody that knows a lot more football than I do, that talks about football, talk about it. Like, just from, obviously your piece was really good with Aaron Murray. Just like the number of guys, David Pollock, I think, had a post talking about it. The number of guys that
know ball.
That know ball. That know a whole lot more ball than me. We're just like blown away. And I think you mentioned the Hendon thing. And the thing that I've said from day one with Nico that I think he does. Hendon was kind of the weak spot in his game, was being able to make throws off platform and being able to, when plays broke down, Hendon was really good at getting a couple of yards, turning a 5-yard sack into a 2-yard gain. And then obviously occasionally the play against Florida in 22, he turns it into a 40-yard gain. But he didn't make a
also
whole lot
mentality. Like Hendon's a leap thing, like it just moving on from the fumble in the Alabama game and just immediately driving back down the field and touching it. Like that, like things like that.
Yes. But you saw it on the very first play of the game where Nico, his first couple reads aren't open. He rolls right, and he finds Chris Brazell on the sideline for like 11-yard gain, just to throw right on the money on the run. Like Hendon didn't have that in this game.
Yeah.
And when you think of most of the elite college quarterbacks, they have that ability where the defense has them stopped. They have the play defended, and then they just buy enough time and make throws down the field. And I think, to your point with the receivers, Dante Thornton, Rue McCoy, Chris Brazell, like those are guys that can win jump balls and have the physicality to win that kind of second play when things get off script. So that, and then the internal clock's obviously fun to watch. After obviously that was a weakness for Joe a year ago, and it's almost to the point where I almost think it's maybe, if anything, a little sped up. Where, and obviously it was Chattanooga game 1, so he had more time to throw, but he might be bailing a little bit early. But when he does have that ability to make throws, when he is extending plays, I don't know if the downside is really that high from that.
Yeah. Quickly here as we wrap up, Vols hoops, Bishop Boswell, year 1 expectations. Ryan Schumpert, what's exciting about him? Biggest concern you have coming into this year for Boswell, and why should Tennessee fans be excited about the 4-star true freshman?
Yeah, I mean, for what, not that I didn't see him the day he walked on campus, but obviously he hasn't spent too much time at Tennessee, and he's built incredibly, incredibly well. A very physical guy. I think, the role thing, to what to expect, not a ton. I think there's a weird middle ground here where obviously it's the same thing Freddie DeLeon never could really grab the minutes last year. It was 5 minutes a game when Zakai Ziegler, 5 to 10 minutes a game when Zakai Ziegler is sitting in conference play. And it doesn't have to be all 10 minutes in a game, but can he steal some minutes there? I'm, what's the right word? Not pessimistic, cautious, I guess, that he's truly developed enough as a point guard at this point to be able to come in and run Tennessee's offense in that way. Don't think it's impossible. Think he'll get 100% get opportunities there, especially early in the season when they play their 7 bye games. He's going to have chances. I think where he's really built to play week 1 or built to play season 1 as a freshman is the Jemai Meshack, Devontae Gaines role of their freshman years when they weren't super developed offensively. And I think he's more developed offensively than those guys, but he's just a tough defender that can come in and try to give you a spark that way. And a guy that you can put in the game because off the ball, who you can maybe hide a little bit on the offensive end, but he's going to play really well on defense and can make some energy plays to spark some things. I wonder how much Tennessee needs that. Like how much room is there going to be for that role on this team? Would be my question. But I think that's what I would feel good about him doing this year. And I do think, I like Tennessee's starting lineup a lot. I do have some questions about the depth when you get past like 7 deep or maybe 8 deep, I guess. So I think there's, a chance for him to grab some minutes in games in the regular season. When they roll into tournament time, I'm pretty skeptical that he's going to have a role where he's going to play every game.
But it feels like he has a better shot than DeLeon did last year. He feels like more of a Barnes type point guard. He feels more of like, once Zakai is gone, like, we should plan on him being the next guy there?
I haven't seen enough to say. I think I would plan on him having a sizable role in whatever that would be, 2025, 26, just with how much Tennessee loses this year. And I think you're going to see him bring in a really big prep class. I don't know if that's him as a starting point guard. I do think he shoots it better. I think he can coexist with Zakai better too. Because obviously that was something Zakai and Freddie couldn't coexist last year. It just wasn't going to work.
This is kind of a sneaky. You just brought up something I hadn't really thought about. Like the step back is coming after this year. This is like the final. We're trying to win a title here for a couple of years, right? I wonder if Tennessee fans, like, It was something I realized when the certain guys when you're seeing who are coming in, it's like, oh, they're going to add several prep guys in this cycle. There's going to be a little bit of not a complete rebuild, but I think it's like a 1 to 2 year window where they're just finally aging out of all their guys, and they're not going to go like super portal heavy to keep trying to like win a title or make the Final Four after this year. I feel like this kind of is the last one for a couple of years.
Yeah, no, I feel that way too.
Do you think the staff feels that way?
To a degree, yeah, for sure. Just I mean, just look at how they're recruiting. I mean, I think they're going to take, from what I've been led to understand, I think they're going to take 5 prep kids. They have 8 scholarships to work with for sure. You assume somebody probably transfers. So it's, and now I think they're going to get some prep guys that are big time recruits that they expect to play day one, and that they invest in, like you would invest in good players in the portal, that you maybe hope are 2 3 year guys. But yeah, I definitely think there's a reset, and I think everybody understands there's a reset. And then the other thing I'll add too on that front, I think it was Kevin Sweeney at SI was the first person who I saw was on this, and it was a really, really good point. Last year was the last year of the COVID guys, and you don't really think about it with Tennessee because that was the class that I think was like Keon Johnson, Corey Walker, and Jaden Springer. So none of those guys were on the team since after their freshman year. In Tennessee, you probably think about it. Last was the Josiah Santi. Well, Tennessee got 3 of their transfers were COVID seniors, and you look at the guys that they targeted in the transfer portal, it's a lot of COVID seniors. So there's going to be a lot less players available, and the type of player that Tennessee's targeted in the transfer portal, there's going to be a lot less available. So when you consider all those things, I think you're absolutely on the money. This is obviously things change a lot in college basketball, but I don't think in 2025, 2026, Tennessee's going to have a SEC championship competitive team. And you're probably banking on Cam Carr having a really good season.
But not too good, because you don't want to cut the draft. It's like, Campbell, we want you to be we want you to be good, but not too good that you're now a lottery player. There's a fine middle ground. It's like the Kavares Tears thing in baseball. We were like, oh god, Dreiling and Tears are too good. They're gone. Yeah. It's over.
No, I will say on that aspect, just the way the nature of it works with the draft. Like, it always felt to me like those guys were probably going to be gone. But no, you're right. I think this is.
Well, I don't think Tennessee fans are ready for it, right? Because this will be the first drop off in the Big Three. Because baseball is obviously humming year over year, and even like the down year 2 years ago, going into 2 years ago now, they were preseason number 2, right? They were still preseason number 2 that year, so it wasn't like there was an expectation that it was going to be a non-contention type year for Tennessee after the number 1 overall team and everything. But Barnes and company in the Danny White era they're right there at Bama and Auburn, top of the SEC every year during this little run. And football is obviously getting better and better each year. Like, this is the first time Tennessee fans, they've been kind of spoiled here with the Big Three. That 25-26 for men's hoops might it just not, they're not going to fall off and be like a bad team, but they're not going to be fighting for 1 or number 2 in the conference. They're going to be fighting for like 4 or 5. I would say somewhere around there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's extremely stupid to say something like this far ahead of time. It feels like a realistic best case scenario. You're talking about like a 4 or 5 seed in the NCAA tournament as opposed to
that's probably best case, because it's because they're going to be mostly young, and we should say that, like, it's going to be a really young team next year. Like, this is it. Like, I think this is there's going to be a lot of learning curves. I mean, also just replacing Zakai, like, he's just gone. Like, that's your Zakai and Jemai are both gone, and they're your leaders this year. So I don't know. It's just going to be.
I mean, what I believe will be the starting rotation this year, Tennessee's going to lose 4 to 5 starters, and what I believe is going to be their top 8 are going to lose.
Wait, who do you think's back of their 5 starters?
What's that?
Who do you think's back of the 5 starters?
Okpara.
Oh, you think he's back? Okay, so Okpara can be back for 1 more year.
Yeah. Yes, but Okpara is not a guy that I see like having taken next step, carry you offensively ceiling. So.
Not unless he transfers to UNC Asheville. Final thing here, Ryan Schumpert. Tennessee baseball season review. Kavares Tears. Did he exceed expectations for you coming into this year when you think back what you thought he was going to be? Your favorite Kavares moment this season, and your biggest surprise when it was all said and done with Kavares Tears Tennessee career here?
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely exceeded expectations. A guy I was high on going into the year, but like I think my bold prediction for on our RTI preview podcast for the season was Kavares Tears hits 15 home runs, and I was like, yeah, that's bold. He has 17 career hits at this point and 2 career home runs. Well, he whatever shattered that, ended up hitting 21, 22. So definitely exceeded expectations. Best moment. This has been on the rundown for a few weeks, Chase, and I
Hmm?
thought we were maybe saving it for Jack to be back on, so I didn't pull up the stat sheet.
Jack, I can't look. Jack Foster, like, where is he?
Where is
Whoa.
he, folks? We can't find Jack. We're not sure where he went. He's disappeared on us. Football's back and we've lost Jack, folks. It's sad, really. Um,
We're all trying to
but
find him. We know
yes,
Ethan's out on vacation. Ethan will be back soon. Jack, who knows?
we
Jack's too
don't
big
know.
for us. He's just too big. Who knows where Jack is?
I think the two moments I think about, maybe a singular, a regular season moment, because when you win the national championship, obviously, most of the time you think of stuff that happened in the postseason. Regular season moments, that home run he hit at Kentucky in Game
Yeah.
3, in that crazy game, and that was, if my memory serves right, a long at bat, a 3-2 at bat that he battled, and he just turned on that ball and hit a ball that you saw the ball flight sitting there, being in person at the game. You saw the ball flight. You thought, all right, that's a double down the line, and it just was just a line that kept on carrying into the Tennessee bullpen. So that's my regular season moment. I think my postseason moments just is what he did in Omaha, especially kind of the first half of the College World Series. It'll be the moment in the ninth inning that I think a lot of people will forget in the Florida State game, that he let it off with a double to center field. Almost the true dagger of the tournament. And Game 3, the line drive that he hit off the top of the wall that probably every other park Tennessee played in all season would have been a home run, but which led to the crazy Inslee slide. And then just the fact of what he did defensively. That I think that's what I'll remember most about Kavares Tears' time at Tennessee, or at least what stands out to me, maybe less than remembering. Um, this is a guy who came in with no position. I remember watching him his first fall at Tennessee, and it's like, this dude can kind of rake. Like, he's really talented. Was a pudgy kid. You knew, from talking to people, he wasn't going to play that season. I guess which would have been the 22 season. He played some first base. He played a little bit of corner outfield. Didn't really look comfortable anywhere. Not a very good defender. And he went from a guy that, and I wrote about it this year, spent his entire 2022 season redshirting, shagging balls. Jordan Beck yelling at him from the batter's box when he was making mistakes, shagging balls, to an all SEC and all American type defender, or all SEC defensive type defender. And not only was he really good in right field with that huge arm, which you saw the potential from early on, what he did in Omaha when Hunter Inslee was out / having DH, he moved to center field. He made a play that maybe not quite as impressive as Hunter Inslee's, but of the same ilk. And he was just a phenomenal. He was just a phenomenal defensive player and a complete baseball player. And I think that's what'll stand out. Tennessee's had a ton of incredible developmental success stories, but he's one that I will always point to as a guy that waited his turn, got a whole lot better, naturally talented from day one, but got a whole lot better in a lot of different areas, and made plays at a huge stage. And Tennessee doesn't win the national championship without him.
Yeah, I think part of it was just that we thought he would be maybe lefty Jordan Beck, and he turned out to be just Jared Dickey with more power. And
Yeah.
that turned out to be a really, really great player. And obviously, too, the outfield stuff. Like, you just didn't know. You were hoping he'd be passable back there. And he was actually an elite outfielder. Like, Tennessee actually needed him with Hunter Inslee getting banged up. Like, he was able to play center field and right field. Like, Kavares just was like like I said, he was Jared Dickey in a lot of ways, where he was just a
More swing
multi-talented.
and miss,
He was
but
what?
more swing and miss than Jared
But
Dickey.
not much. Like, Kavares was a tough out. Like, he had some little blips here late in the year, but he was Jared Dickey. I mean, it's hard to top Jared Dickey's. I mean, I guess on this, Dylan Dreiling was probably the closest to Dickey on this year's team of just the swing and miss ability and just how hard it was just to get him out. Every time he came up. Maybe Reese Chapman there a little bit down the stretch too. Reese Chapman. I think it's gonna be really good going next year. But Tears, just the power, the big moments. He was up for big moments. He slid around the lineup, 6th, 4th. Like, he was in different spots, different parts of the outfield. Like, I can't say enough good things about Kavares Tears, and I'm gonna miss him. Unfortunately, like, we're not gonna get him and Dreiling for one more year because they were just I think there was just so many eyeballs, and for good reason, on Semo and Blake Burke, but the middle of the order with Tears and Dreiling all season long just always gonna be underrated, I think, a little bit, because they were elite in their own right. And yeah, I'm excited to see what it looks like professionally for Tears over there in the San Diego Padres organization. Ryan Schumpert, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Rocky Top Insider this week?
Plenty of kind of past all the game one stuff, but plenty of prep for North Carolina State this week. Stories on that front. Talking to Rod Baxley, who covers North Carolina State here, so we'll have a piece from him, kind of a quick scout in North Carolina State, and anything else that comes up for Tennessee football this week as we get heading into the real fun gets going, as Tennessee heads to Charlotte to face what I guess will be a top. What do we think? What were they, 24 this week? Top 25 comes out tomorrow. Do we think the Western Carolina loss is enough? I kind of don't think it is. I think they hold in there.
Probably, and they probably want to have it holded there, right? Like they just want to be able to say, because this is prime time. We're getting Reese and Kirk and everybody. You want this to be a top 25 matchup. So if they fall out, loses some juice there a little bit if they're unranked in this game now. Yeah, for sure. But, ESPN doesn't control the rankings. I think they probably do. Florida State's definitely going to fall out, whether they pull out. We're recording. I mean, DJ missed a truly shocking wide open touchdown just mere moments ago, late in the second quarter. They're going to fall out. Was that A&M? Was A&M in, right? They were back in the top 25 this past week. But they're out now, right?
Well, they will be, I think.
Yeah, they're going to be out.
Somebody's going to fall out instead of them. I think they'll hang on. And the score didn't look quite as bad as that game, truly felt when you go into the fourth quarter trailing. I think they won 21-0 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. Ryan Schumpert, always a pleasure, and I will talk to you next week.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.